down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news, tips, and your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey, that's me. Thank you for joining me for another live episode of TogChat. I'm your host, Joe Edelman, and for the next 90 minutes, we are going to talk about all things photography because, as always, my mission is to help photographers like you to develop a solid understanding of the hows and whys behind great photographs. So as always, gang, do me a favor. I need all of you. Please take a moment, tell your photography friends that we're streaming live on YouTube right now. Facebook, Twitter, they're the fastest way to get the word out. You can click the share button below the video, or you can share the link tog.chat/live. I'll put it right there in the chat window for you so that you can go ahead and copy and paste that. Hey, as always, we've got a lot of photographers here from all over the world. I would really appreciate it if you guys check in for me. Say, hey, let me know where you're from. Cooley's here, John Edwards here, Mark Adams here. How are you doing, Adam? Andrew, Dwayne is here, Trevor. I know Carl's here. We got a lot of people here. Natasha's here. Thank you all for choosing to spend a Wednesday evening or part of your Wednesday evening with me to talk photography. So as always, start posting those questions. I've got some really good ones lined up that have been coming in, but I'll do my best to answer all your questions in our 90-minute, 1-hour show. All right, so let's dig right in, gang. I am back from Florida, had a great trip down south. In fact, Roderick's here. I got to meet Roderick in Bradenton last weekend at Johnson Photo Supply, and I also spent a day in Miami at Pittman Photo, and they were awesome people, great people that came out. We had a really, really good time. We had some nice models to work with. So I want to dive right in here. We ready? So I got a question here from Carl. And this is one that comes up every so often. So I've answered it before, but it's worth talking about, right? You all have seen that video, at least I hope you've seen that video that I did, that's all about fill the frame, right? So Carl's question is, he recently shot a wedding and he ran into some problems with cropping. He's always tried to fill the frame and he never had to worry before about printing photos. He's been shooting mostly digital and delivering digital, but I guess where he used to work and shoot, they had an editing department that took care of all that. So as he was getting his images from this wedding ready to be printed, he was finding that he was having a really hard time fitting the pictures into the sizes they wanted. You know, like crops for, 4x6s, 5x7s, 11x14s, they're all slightly different formats, right? So he's looking at, is there an easy way? Obviously, it's a lesson learned. So let's go back and talk about that fill the frame concept, right? There is a caveat. There is an exception. I mean, for all the rules that are out there, and you guys remember, I always talk about the fact that rule is a 4-letter word. Don't use 4-letter words, right? So, the rule is going to depend on what is your need. So if you know going into a wedding, Carl, in the future, unfortunately, this isn't going to help you with the one that you just shot, but in the future, when you're going into a wedding, if you're selling prints and you know that people are going to want 8x10s or 11x14s or 5x7s, you need to leave yourself a little extra space on the edges. Now, one of your options, Carl, would of course be to switch to Micro Four Thirds because Micro Four Thirds is much more conveniently formatted for print sizes. But hey, that's not a reason to go buy a new camera. I'm kidding, right? So it literally is a matter of just leaving a little bit of extra space. Now, let's flip back to the other side. That doesn't mean don't fill the frame. It means fill the frame based on your needs for printing. But yeah, anytime we're shooting, gang, we've always kind of got to think a little bit ahead in terms of what is the intended output. Now, notice I use the word intended because, hey, things can change. My whole point behind telling people fill the frame, my whole point behind that video where I start out the video just yelling, fill the frame. I see so many people that have this nice big full frame sensor and they put their subject right here in the middle and they leave all this space and then they crop it later to do this really tight headshot. That's simply ridiculous, right? Because you're spending a lot of money for those pixels. I don't care if you're shooting Micro Four Thirds, APS-Cs, or full frame. You're spending a lot of money for those pixels. Use them. That's the point. So there's a balance, right? There's simply a balance. I mean, back in the day, we used to be able to remove the ground glass from the cameras, so we could actually put a piece of tape or etch into the ground glass the different print formats. That was a very common thing to do. Even on 35 millimeter with the old Nikon F and that, we could pull the ground glass out and we could mark them for, this is your framing for 8x10, this is your framing for 5x7 or 11x14. Obviously, that's not really doable in the digital realm today, but still really not that hard, to kind of get a sense of, hey, this is the spacing I need to. So unfortunately, Carl, I don't have a simple answer for you, but that's the best answer, is just kind of planning ahead a little bit, but still using as many pixels as you possibly can in order to get the job done, right? So Duke has a question. Do you need to have a contract for a makeup artist? This is going to be your first time using one. Duke, not really, and not unless you have reason to believe this makeup artist is going to be a pain in the butt to deal with, is going to stiff you over. I generally don't use contracts for makeup artists. In fact, true story, I'm not going to name any names, but I ran into a makeup artist in Florida on my last trip. So obviously when I travel to these different locations around the country and I'm doing these workshops, I have to get local talent, local makeup artists, local hairstylists, local models. So the makeup artist that I ran into, or I shouldn't say that I ran into, that I found for this event, she sent me a contract. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And it's literally the first time a makeup artist has ever sent me a contract. And the irony, and that's why I'm not going to name any names, the irony of it is that the contract actually was very poorly worded. And it was really worded very much in my favor. It kind of actually screwed her over, not to mention that it had a lot of really bad grammar and spelling errors in it. So I actually took 20 minutes and I rewrote her contract for her and sent it back and said, here, I can't sign that other one in good conscience because it's basically setting you up to fail. But here, this is, what I'll do. In the end, she didn't have an issue with not using it in that. But with makeup artists, I've never had a need. I would suggest, Duke, the only time that I think that you should really be concerned about that is potentially if you're dealing with a large client and they want lots of protections. But generally, a makeup artist is going to get paid the day of the job. Generally, not 100% of the time. It depends on the circumstances. But when working with a photographer one-on-one, yeah, the expectation is they're going to come in, they're going to do your makeup and hair, and you're going to pay them that day. So for the most part, as long as they're getting paid, they're very happy, you're not really going to need a contract in that regards. Because here's the thing, Duke. The idea that, let's say, the makeup artist comes and the makeup sucks and you shoot the pictures and then you try to go back on the contract later and say, hey, you didn't live up to expectations. Well, that doesn't work. I don't care what the contract says. And the reason that doesn't work is because unless there was somebody at the studio holding a gun to your head, threatening to pull the trigger if you didn't take the pictures with that really crappy makeup, unless that was the case, you have no recourse. In other words, you should have told her then, fix it, right? So, yeah, not really much need for it. So, Trevor actually noted here, which is a good call, Trevor. Wouldn't turning on the grid, if it's available, aid with the format size estimates? Yeah, it would. I mean, most digital cameras today, DSLRs and mirrorless, all of them, have the ability in the viewfinder to turn on the grid. Some of them have kind of multi-purpose, or I shouldn't say multi-purpose, numbered grid setups and that you can use. They're not exact. In other words, I haven't seen a camera yet that has like a 4x5 grid or a 5x7 grid or an 11x14 grid, but they will help you kind of get a better sense. Bottom line, it takes a little bit of practice, but Trevor, that's actually a really good call. I mean, that certainly would give you a little better idea. Okay, Cooley had a question here. What type of metering do you use in your camera? If you're referring to do I use spot metering, averaging, center weighted? Basically, I use center weighted averaging. With digital cameras especially, I pay so much less attention to the light meter because, especially with a mirrorless camera like my Olympus, or even if you're using Sony or now Nikon or Canon or Fuji, right? In a mirrorless camera, you're working with an EVF, so you're seeing the finished image in your viewfinder. And if I'm in the studio where I have that EVF, basically turned on to live boost so that I can actually see, then I don't really need the meter anyway because I can't meter my flashes with the camera. So yeah, for me, I have it set on center weighted, but it's not really a major deal in that regard. And I think most digital cameras today kind of default to that as their starting point. So yeah, that's my preference, okay? Carl also asked if I've ever shot a fire breather. If so, do you have any pointers? Matter of fact, I have actually on several occasions. Probably the biggest pointer is do not stand in front of where they're going to spit the whiskey. Because generally a fire breather is basically going to put alcohol in their mouth and spit it out, and that's what lights as it flies, so you do not want to be standing where that's going to land. Honestly, Carl, no. I mean, you know, in terms of like, are you going to do it as a timer exposure or anything like that? No, definitely not. Really, the decision you have to make is, are you going to shoot at all available light? In which case, I would encourage you to crop tight and go with like a shutter priority automatic, but crop really tight. In other words, if you've got a lot of dark background and just a little bit of flame going through, your meter's going to go haywire with that, right? So you want to really fill the frame so the meter's grabbing the scene accordingly. If you have the ability to interact with a fire breather and you can kind of get a test in, then certainly the ideal spot to meter for is their face. But the other option is to use a strobe. So use a really slow shutter speed. When I say really slow, 30th or 60th of a second. But then also use a strobe. So the strobe is going to record the person, okay? And give you a nice image of the person. The slower shutter speed is going to let that flame blur just a little bit. And, you know, again, two very different approaches. But the biggest thing is, you know, you shoot heavy, shoot a lot. You don't really benefit from doing spray and pray where you're just going to, you know, blow off a ton of frames. You really don't. Hang on one second here. There we go. You know, I would just encourage you to, you know, really try and fill a frame. And then at that point, you can get away with aperture priority automatic easily. Okay. John Edwards asking, next week, he's going to shoot a cellist. Okay, cool. Any tips on how to deal with the shiny instrument? The cello is super polished. Somebody actually suggested the idea after you posted that question, well, what about using like a polarizer? Yeah, you could. So I'm not a fan. This is going to come up in another question. It's in the queue for later. I'm not a fan of using polarizers to try and correct things when you've got humans in the shot. And the simple reason is polarizers are finicky, right? They just are, because you're dealing with angles of light in order to get things to work. So the problem is when you're dealing with a human in the shot, you kind of have to be telling that person, it's like, do not move, do not turn that cello, don't breathe, like don't angle it, don't change it at all, because then all the adjustments you're making just kind of goes completely out of whack. So honestly, John Edward, I am a fan of doing one of two things. One, trying to set your light up on angle so none of it is reflecting directly off of the cello. The challenge to that is, of course, that since you're photographing the person holding the cello, that doesn't always allow for the most flattering lighting. So that's number one. Number two, I will give you a little tip about working with big reflective surfaces like that. So now, this also depends on whether you are shooting in a studio or on location and how much gear you can take. But sometimes one of the best ways to deal with a shiny surface like the front of a cello, which keep in mind that's wood, right? But it's going to be very, very reflective, is actually to purposefully give it something to reflect. Meaning, you would do one of two things. You would take either a black scrim and you would place it angled. So if you're here, the cello's here, you're going to place a scrim here so that you're kind of catching the angle so that basically what the cello is reflecting back to you is the black scrim. That's option one. Option two, depending on where your light is and how bright the light is, make that scrim actually white. As long as you're not lighting the scrim, having a little bit of the white reflect off of it is not going to be nearly as bright as having a, you know, like a point light source reflect off, but it's going to give the cello a little bit more of a pop. So it depends on whether you're looking for it to be kind of very subtle or whether you're looking for it to really show its detail. And I will point out one other thing, John Edward, depending on what the shot is being used for. So remember, the end result is always what's going to drive how we do things. So depending on what it's being used for, we could argue that you don't necessarily have to show the whole cello. It's kind of like if you crop off the top of somebody's head, pretty safe bet it was there, right? You're probably not doing portraits of people that just had lobotomies, okay? It's only photographers that worry about the top of a head being cropped off. So at the same time, you could show, the cello from the midpoint up, and it's a cello. So depending on what the end use of the shot is, keep in mind, you may not need or want the entire cello in your picture. But honestly, if I were doing it, I would be taking along a scrim to reflect into it. And in that way, essentially, I'm just making sure that I'm not aiming light directly at the cello, so it's going to reflect right back at me, light slightly off angle, and then using that scrim to reflect back. That's how I would approach it, okay? So, Bill, it was nice to meet you last Friday. You're taller than I thought you would be. I'm only 5'8", man. I'm not that tall. So did I really look that small on camera? Okay. So, but seriously, it was great to meet you, Bill. I appreciate you coming out. It was actually great to meet quite a few of my YouTube subscribers and a few of my patrons down there. So, and it was really a lot of fun. Very quick and crazy weekend, but a lot of fun. So, Gord Smith has a question here. Would you ever use a wide-angle lens in the work that you do? And if so, why? Sometimes, yeah. I mean, certainly, you don't see me use wide angles that often. But the first thing that comes to mind for me where I would probably go with a wide angle lens, and that would be if I was doing an environmental portrait. In other words, it's a shot where I wanted to show a person kind of in their surroundings. Actually, as an example, John Edwards talking about the cellist. Well, if he were photographing the cellist, let's say the cellist was sitting in the first chair on stage, and even if it's, it's an empty stage, like the rest of the orchestra isn't there, but the chairs are there and all the music stands are there, it would be potentially cool to photograph the cellist with a wide angle lens, which allows you to get fairly close, but then still shows a broad area of the background behind the cellist. So for me, it would be kind of, an environmental portrait. That would be the most obvious thing, I guess, where I would think to use it. And then from there, it's simply a matter of, maybe I'm after a special effect. Because keep in mind, if you're using a wide enough angle lens, you can get distortion, whether it's a matter of getting close and getting the person's face to kind of bulb out, or whether it's getting really low and making the person look really tall. So wide angle lenses can also be used for effect. So I hate the idea of never, right? I'm not a big fan of never. I generally don't, only because I don't have a lot of need for that or opportunity to do so. But sure, there are no rules, so go for it. Sergey asks, this is a great one. I love this question. What is the right exposure and how do you achieve it? So Sergey, there's two legitimate answers here. So for the techtographers, and I'm not insulting anybody, just being sincere, for the techtographers, the people that have to have a right or wrong kind of by the numbers. In other words, that's where they find their security, okay? So for those folks, you're going to use your light meter and you're going to live by your light meter. You're going to live by the histogram, etc. Okay? For the rest of us, people like myself, the great part about the work that I do, Sergey, is exposure is subjective. In other words, there's really no right or wrong. There's good and bad. In other words, if it looks bad, it's bad. Hence, bad, I would say, is wrong, right? But if it looks good, it's good. So a good example is and I haven't done any recently, right? Because keep in mind, guys, remember, I'm kind of rebuilding my portfolio, after all those years with Nikon. And now that, I'm with Olympus, I'm not using my Nikon images anymore. So I'm like starting from scratch, which is really cool because I get to shoot crazy stuff. But I used to do a lot of those backlit images where all the light was behind the subject. So technically, I was grossly overexposing those images based on the numbers. So the things that the techtographers would want to live by, the light meter, the histogram, etc., those images were horribly overexposed, but they looked awesome, right? So they're not wrong in that sense. So it's really a matter of what your priority is. Certainly, if you were hired by a company to reproduce an image of the Mona Lisa, right? If they were going to send you to Rome, Italy, and your task was to make an accurate replica, accurate presentation of the Mona Lisa. Well, then yes, there is a proper exposure because that proper exposure also has to have the proper color etc. But for the kind of work that I do, generally speaking, no. Proper exposure is what looks good to my eye. Do I like it? And certainly, you know, the idea is once you put that picture out there in the world, there are going to be people that will look at it and say, you know, I don't like how dark that is. And other people will look at it and say, I don't like how bright that is. It should be darker. You know, no other person's going to have the same experience with it. So if you're shooting for yourself, you're all that matters. If you're shooting for a client, the client and you are the only two people that matter in terms of, is it right or is it wrong? But my advice is stick with the visual aspect. Don't get caught up in the numbers unless that's your mindset. You know, if you're an engineer, if you're a scientist, and that's the way your mind works, then cool, because that's where you're going to find your comfort, and that's what will also be most pleasurable for you, and that's okay. But otherwise, if you're a visual shooter like myself, it's all about what you see. So Roderick, who I got to meet last weekend, is the Olympus 12-100 f4.0 good enough as a do-it-all lens with the exception of sports, wildlife, and macro work? Would you feel the need to buy another lens? So I just got one of the 12-100s recently. So for those of you that are not familiar with that lens, okay, this is the 12-100 on an EM1 Mark II, right? So just to give you a comparison in size, this is the Olympus 40-150. Now I get it on YouTube. This looks like I'm holding like a 70-200 from Nikon or Canon. Keep in mind, this is half the size and half the weight of the Nikon and Canon 70-200s, right? So it's tiny by comparison. So there's, you know, the 40-150, there's the 12-100. So the great part about this is this lens is an equivalent of, for full frame folks, it's an equivalent of 24 millimeter all the way up to 200 millimeter. Now, for those of you that are, you know, the pixel peepers, and those of you that are like the bokeh, you know, crazed maniac people, oh, but it's an f4. Okay, so then go carry 6 lenses and buy the 1.2 lenses, that kind of stuff. For a carry-about lens, it's going to do darn near anything. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. When I was in Florida this weekend, I had 3 lenses in my bag. That's it. I had this 12-100. I have my 45 millimeter f1.2 Pro, because if I didn't take that lens, people would be like, what? That's like all you ever talk about, because it is, right? And I had an 8 millimeter fisheye in my bag. That's it. That's all I took. Now, this particular trip to Florida, I didn't get to shoot near as much as I would have liked to, just for fun. I really only wound up having time to shoot at the presentations because we had a lot of travel time in between. But yeah, Roderick, I would suggest that it's a great lens. Now, in terms of needing to buy another lens, well, yeah, that's that big word that we all get stuck on. It's like, do we need it? Do we want it? Right? I can tell you right now, for most people, 12-100 is more lens than they're ever going to need. But in terms of if you want to be able to, get a little bit creative and that kind of stuff, well, then, you might want to get something that's a little wider than the 12, or even something that's a little longer than the 100. So, Duke Cam, will I ever come to West Virginia? I would love to come to West Virginia. Gang, I'll tell you a little secret. I'm not really supposed to share this, but seriously, this is how you do it. Go to your local photo retailer who sells Olympus gear. So if you're in the US and you've got a local photo retailer that sells Olympus gear, you need to go lean on them. You need to tell them that they need to talk to Olympus and get Olympus to send me out there to you to do a presentation, because those people have the power to put in the request and ask. You guys know, so I was just down in Miami and Sarasota. Next month, I'm going to be in St. Louis for the Crevcore Camera Photopalooza. The month after that, I'm going to be at Precision Camera in Austin, Texas for their holiday expo. So that's the way that you get me there, is you talk to your local Olympus retailer and tell them, hey, you need to have Joe Edelman come out and teach at one of their events or one of their classes. And that's how you make it happen. It gets the conversation going, okay? I'm easy. I'll go wherever I'm paid to go and talk. It's real simple, okay? Somebody's gonna cover my expenses, pay me to go there, I'm there. So, especially you folks out on the West Coast, just saying, you're really slacking, because I'm waiting for that West Coast trip stuff to come in there, okay? So, you guys out West, let's let's go, talk it up, right? I'm ready to come out to Sammy's anytime now. So Trevor, Olympus really does seem to have a great group of lenses. Yeah, you know, and I'm not saying this because I'm an Olympus visionary. You know, I told you guys this. I'm never going to be an Olympus commercial, but I will tell you this: coming from Nikon, I am incredibly impressed. I have yet to find a bad M.Zuiko lens that just is not amazing straight out of the box. Their lenses are wicked sharp. They have a great range of lenses. The pro lenses all being weather sealed and waterproof are just amazing. Really, really well done, well thought out. I have a feeling we'll be seeing some more pro lenses next year, along with some other stuff, but I can't talk about that, so we'll just have to wait and see. I saw somebody earlier was a little disappointed that Olympus didn't have anything at Photokina. Photokina was the big show that just wrapped up in Germany last week. Yeah, I mean, it's always cool to, you know, get new gear, right? But that's not the kind of company that Olympus is, and that's part of what Olympus owners like about Olympus. You know, they're not dumping a new camera out every 12 to 16 months and saying, here, you need to buy this, otherwise you suck as a photographer, right? Instead, you know, they put a camera out, and then 12 to 16 months later, they basically give you a new camera by giving you a substantial firmware upgrade that, unlike those other companies, they write that firmware upgrade in response to users' wishes/complaints about the camera when it's released. So basically you're getting all new, well, not all new features, but getting new features, and you're getting tweaks on existing features when that firmware comes out. So yeah, like I said last week, we talked about it, and I don't want to belabor the point this week. I don't see Olympus chasing this current full frame trend, and I'm going to tell you straight up from the bottom of my heart, I hope they don't. I really do. I am a firm believer of looking backward to be able to look forward historically, to try and understand how things are evolving. One of the best ways to understand how we are evolving in anything as humans, as society, is to look backwards first. And I really, really feel that within the next 5 years, all this full frame frenzy, it's going to hit a wall, and it's going to hit a wall hard. And then we're going to start going back because we're going to start to get realistic again. And people are going to start to really get their heads wrapped around what the priorities should be. And in the meantime, in this 5 years, Micro Four Thirds is going to continue to grow. Micro Four Thirds is going to continue to make technological advances. It's going to continue to improve even more. So you're going to find things coming closer to a middle where it's going to be a lot harder to justify the size, the weight, the additional cost. So we'll see. 5 years from now, we'll come back and we'll have that conversation, and we'll see if I'm right, okay? Sven, how are the 8200s working for you in the studio so far? Love them. They're great. Travel with them, use them in the studio. Just makes life simple. Like I said, you know, Honey Badgers are awesome. The new lithium ones look really cool. I think they're well done, especially with the TTL, the high-speed sync, all that. But these are great. The 8200s are just awesome for what I'm doing and how I'm working at this point. So I've been really pleased. So Jason has a question here. So this one, I'm going to ask those of you that want to shoot models, or those of you that do shoot models, do me a favor and follow along. Actually, really quick here, Mr. Pirate Brain, what is your date in Austin? I would love to go see you live. My dates in Austin, here, let me switch the screen over here really quick, and I'll pull it up for you. I'll show you also how you guys can keep track of my travel schedule. When you go to my website, if you click on the link Lectures and Workshops, right? So when that loads, whoops, we don't need to, well, if you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, please do. I don't spam people. I finally got my act together with the newsletter. I send it out like every week, week and a half, just with updates, little tidbits, that kind of stuff. But if we scroll all the way down here, November 9th and 10th is when I'm in St. Louis at CrevCore Photopalooza. And then Precision Camera is December 7th and 8th. That's a Friday and a Saturday, very beginning of December. So hope to see you there, Mr. Pirate Brain. If you can make it, that'd be awesome. My exact speaking times and the registration information is not here on the website yet, but as soon as it's available, I will have it updated and you'll be able to find it here. So in fact, I'll put this link in the chat window for you guys so that you have it, okay? And there you go. So James Okay, volume just doubled, not on my end. So folks, let me know if all of a sudden you had a volume issue there, but nothing happened here that I'm seeing, at least in my information, okay? All right, so this is a question, again, that I'm gonna ask you guys. If you shoot models, if you're thinking about shooting models, and especially if you actually wanna help models, right? I mean, help them get signed by an agency and get work, please follow along with this, because this is a question that it's a very sincerely asked question, but the answer can also be a little bit confusing, shall we say, okay? So here we go. This is from Jason Page. He asks, I've talked several times in my videos about helping models with their portfolios, particularly about not making them too sexy or revealing. He has a newer model that wants to shoot with him who, in his opinion, she's wanting far sexier photos than really should be in her portfolio. They're kind of bordering on boudoir and fine art style images, fine art being nudes, right? Incidentally, he adds, that's not the kind of modeling that she wants to do, but she believes that her portfolio needs to be revealing and sexy. So her question is, how would I suggest that he talks her down from doing this? I know it's not often that photographers are asking how to get a model to be less sexy and revealing, but he doesn't want to lead her down a path that would hurt her career. So I love questions like this. And I love questions like this for one simple reason, because this is a person that is being human first, thinking about another person, not just taking advantage of a young girl who's willing to get naked or half naked just so that you can create art, okay? So Jason, seriously, thank you, all right? So this question was posted in my Facebook group earlier today, and one of the comments that was made in response, which was legitimately a reasonable comment, the way that a lot of people would understand the modeling industry, the person suggested that agencies would potentially want some of these more revealing pictures in the chance that this model would get hired, let's say as an example, to be like in a Calvin Klein ad where, you know, maybe it's like the girl's topless, but she's covered and she's wearing like the little white cotton boy shorts kind of stuff. So, you know, it's kind of a revealing picture, but it's not really revealing, you know, what we all like to call that implied nude, which that's a whole nother conversation. Please don't be the photographer that uses the phrase implied nude. That phrase should be banned. We'll come back to that in a minute, all right? So, and I explained in the group when that comment was posted that that's actually not a good idea. So let's explain. First of all, Jason, I'm going to tell you what I would tell a model if I was consulting with a model. The first thing is to understand that she does not need to shoot in a bikini. She does not need to shoot in lingerie. She certainly does not need to shoot nude in order to be a model. Contrary to what you see on reality TV, right? You don't have to do that. So if we break this down from a business standpoint, because you know, in the modeling world, the real modeling world, when I say professional modeling, let's be real, it's no different than photography, right? If we're talking professional, meaning if you're not getting paid, you're not working, right? So I'm talking for the girls that want to get paid professionally through an agency to model. It comes down to what is referred to in the business world as economy of scale. Certainly, the more things that you are comfortable with, that's number one, and as a result of being comfortable, willing to do, well then the more opportunity that you may have. But you are not required to do swimwear, lingerie, and nudes. And in fact, if you do swimwear, lingerie, and nudes poorly, meaning you wind up working with a photographer that simply creates images that are trashy. You may not have done anything trashy in the photos, but the images are so poorly done, the angles are not flattering, etc. They look trashy, and as a byproduct, you look trashy. If you do that, those images could negatively impact your career. So frequently, agencies will say, we want to see a body shot of you. Well, understand that from the standpoint of an agency and a client, traditionally that's going to be the bikini picture. It's like, you know, the snapshot in front of the wall, like the mugshot in the bikini. If the girl is not comfortable in that bikini, then a body shot is a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Well fitted, that show her shape. So body shot does not have to mean skin, okay? Now, Jason, here's how you're gonna convince this young lady that she doesn't have to do something she doesn't want to do. And it's very simple. Start looking at the ads in magazines. Ask her, if you could be in 2 magazines, what 2 magazines would you be in? And she's going to pick 2 very popular, well-known magazines, and they're probably not going to be magazines like Playboy or Maxim, okay? They're probably going to be like 2 fashion magazines or something like that. Well, simply go pick up a copy of those magazines and look at the ads in those magazines. And then tell me how many women you see in those ads are in swimsuits, lingerie, or nude. You're going to find that it's an extremely small number, if at all. So just like we photographers, if we think a girl's really gorgeous and has an amazing body and we would like to photograph her nude, even if her profile says, I don't do nudes, we're going to ask, what's the worst that can happen? She's going to say no, right? So I explained to the girls, look, you don't have to show a nude in order to get hired to do a nude. If the agency thinks you're right for the job, they want to make money. They will certainly ask you, hey, are you okay with doing this? But that doesn't mean you have to have it in your portfolio. So the challenge for this young lady, if she's going to do the sexier images in her book, they better be amazing. And I don't mean creative, because a modeling portfolio is not creative. A modeling portfolio with creative images fails at its intended purpose. The goal of a modeling portfolio is to show the model's ability to model, not to show how cool the makeup artist is, not to show how amazing the hairstylist is, not to show how incredible the photographer is with lighting or backgrounds. It is to show her ability to portray characters, to show different emotions. That's what a portfolio is. So if she chooses to do those images, they better be incredible. Anything less than incredible makes her look bad. So that's the answer, Jason. Really good that you're thinking that. There is a section on my website. So now I'm not sure, I'll tell you guys straight up, I'm not sure why I had the sound issue, but I'm going to switch over one more time here. So I will turn my voice down as I do that, okay? But on my website, at the top of every page, guys, there is a link called Resources for Models. If you click on that link, and let me see if I can solve this sound issue here real quick that you guys are getting. If you click on that link, screen capture, there's part of the problem right there. So let's turn that off. Hopefully now the sound's going to get better. All right. But if you click on that link, there's a lot of articles there that will tell you about what goes into a portfolio, what makes a good portfolio. You'll find a bunch of stuff in this first left-hand column, 15 tips for a great portfolio, modeling portfolio 101, all that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you, Jason, check that out. By all means, encourage her to check that out. And hopefully, you know, that will kind of get her set up on the right path where she needs to be. Okay, but good for you, seriously, for looking out. Okay, all right. So next question here. Cooley had a question earlier. I had to laugh when I read this. Is it strange to use a strobo frame on a wedding, or is he just old-fashioned? So for those of you that don't know what a strobo frame is, they've been around for a long time. Basically, it's a mount that you put on the bottom of the camera. It's got a big, you know, kind of L bracket that comes up, and it holds your strobe. But the nice part is once the camera's mounted, you can basically flip the camera from horizontal to vertical without actually ever moving, you know, the strobe and the strobe handle. Cooley, it's not old-fashioned. It's not bad. I promise you, your wedding clients don't care what gear you use as long as they have great pictures and they feel like they got their money's worth. So if you are used to using that strobo frame and if you are getting the kind of lighting and the kind of imagery that you want, knock yourself out, man. That's like totally cool. Don't worry about, you know, somebody looks at it and says, oh, that's been around forever. Who cares? Okay. Langston Ball, conversely, is it damaging to shoot this type of content when you're getting started for photographers? Well, I mean, it's damaging to shoot that kind of content, Langston, if you do it poorly, right? I mean, come on, if you know, you go to websites like Model Mayhem, or in your purple port, that kind of stuff. You spend 15 minutes there. You'll see a few really, really amazing images because there are some incredibly talented people, both on the photography and the modeling side of it. And then you see a very, very large percentage of trash, just straight up trash, perverted trash, right? And I don't think I'm a prude. I like a naked woman as much as anybody else does. But, for me, there's some criteria that have to be checked off. For me to really enjoy that image, the woman definitely needs to look empowered, like she is doing it because she is enjoying herself and wants to. And there's also that fantasy piece. I like the eye contact. Now, I'm not saying you have to have eye contact, but I like the eye contact because I like to feel like she's doing it for me. That's what I enjoy in a sexy image. Some people I call them voyeuristic images. It's, imagine that image of the girl in the high heels and stockings and garter belt and corset, and she's leaning on the mantle of the fireplace, and you're kind of looking through the door and you see her in the distance. So you kind of feel like you're a little bit of a voyeur when you see that image. And don't get me wrong, the people that do those and do them well, they are beautiful images. But for me, I love that interaction. So, I think ultimately, it's not so much that it's bad to do them at any point in your career. It's bad to do them poorly and with the wrong intention in mind. And obviously, let's face it, in today's world, if you're not treating your subjects properly, hey, that's also very problematic, right? So I think that's something that we all have to be we all have to be aware of in that regard. And, I found in my life that by being very honest with people and being very sincere with them, and as you guys have heard me talk about before, essentially trying to put myself in their shoes and interact with them that way is always going to put me on the right side of doing the right thing in terms of how I interact with them and how I treat them. So I would encourage you to consider it that way. Okay? So, let's see here. Joe Fendrick, I'm starting a photography club at my church, and we're looking for ideas for group activities. We are in Wisconsin, so it would be cold soon. Well, Joe, first of all, really cool that you're starting a club. That's great. In terms of group activities, man, it could be like anything. Literally what I would say, instead of me giving you a bunch of, and I'm not trying to dodge your question, but instead of me giving you a bunch of ideas, at your very first meeting, you got to take a poll. Ask people, hey, what do you like to shoot? Some people are going to say insects. Some people are going to say landscapes. Some people are going to say star trails. Some people are going to be into, shooting snow scenes. Some people are going to be portrait people. And boom, there's your activities. Where's a good place to go shoot star trails? Where's a good place to go shoot landscapes in your area? Who has a studio or a studio space where, or is there a room that you guys can get access to where you can do portraits? And then essentially create opportunities for the group to experience these different types of shooting, because that's really kind of the idea with the photography club. It's not all about, it shouldn't be, at least in my opinion, all about one style or one kind of photography. One of the great things about joining a photography club is you get exposed to all different kinds of photography. And believe me, gang, a good photographer can handle almost any type of photography. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be amazing at all other types. But again, a good photographer who understands photography, who has taken the time to learn the basics and has a solid foundation, is going to be able to at least work their way through almost any situation with a satisfactory result. So, that being said, that's one of the great things about, the whole camera club scene is that you are getting exposure to all these different things. So, Joe, that's how I would kind of approach it if it were me. I would actually poll your membership and see what they're into, and that's going to tell you, hey, these are the activities that you should do. So, okay, let's see here. Mark Van Deelen, he has a question about manual exposure combined with a speed light on TTL mode. Does the metering mode of the camera affect the TTL measuring? Let's say spot metering versus evaluative metering, etc. I'm not sure, Joe. I think, so the second part of your question, does the metering mode of the camera affect the TTL measuring? I don't believe it does in most cases. I know with my Olympus cameras, it doesn't. I'm pretty sure with Nikon, it doesn't. I can't speak for every brand, but in terms of, is it a problem to use manual exposure in the camera and then TTL in the speed light? No, not at all. Because basically whatever your aperture is set at, on the camera, that's what's going to, tell the TTL, hey, you're working to this aperture, boom. So I think that if this were me, well, I mean, I'll be honest with you, this is the first time this question's been posed to me this way. I think that you're maybe overthinking the process a little bit. So my advice to you would be use your metering, and this goes back to what I was talking about before with metering. I never switch mine. I use the center weighted averaging, done, that's it. That's more than adequate. We're talking digital photography here, right? So I would use whatever metering version that you're used to using and then turn your TTL on. And I think you will be, you'll be absolutely fine, okay? All right, Nahid. He always struggles with white balance. Don't we all at some point, right? He would love to get some tips or advice regarding that. He uses auto white balance, but he shoots raw. He finds that he spends so much time to decide where to stop. I get stuck between warming up or cooling down. I mostly have problems with tan skin. Part of the face looks red, part of it brown, and he starts struggling over how to get the skin tone right. So, Nahid, since you're shooting raw, this sounds to me that you're actually having less of a white balance problem than you are having a post-processing problem. It sounds to me like you're overdoing it, meaning you're just experimenting too much, and it's like, you tweak one little thing, it's like, okay, that's not bad, and then you tweak something else, it's like, oh, well, that's not really good, and then you're trying to fix that, and then it's like, oh, well, that's good, oh, but that's a little too far, now you're trying to fix that, and then by the time you're done, yes, you've actually got this really weird set of colors. So, I mean, my honest advice to you, let me just grab one of these here. If you are wanting to find kind of an easier way, and believe me, you don't have to get one of these are expensive, but this is a passport color checker, okay? You can get, one of these. So when you do your test shots, have your subject hold this for the test shot. Once you've got your exposure set, like get your exposure set, do a test shot with this, a final test shot, so you have that in a frame. And then when you go into Photoshop or Lightroom, all you got to do is use the eyedropper on like the middle gray, and boom, it's going to give you perfect color balance. You don't have to spend money on these. You can get like really inexpensive for like a couple bucks little gray and white cards that are on like a little lanyard. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But at least the way you've kind of written your question out here, it honestly sounds to me like the real problem's in post, not in camera, okay? Ryan, what is the most important thing to prepare for a wedding event? Hey, by the way, I'll just let you guys know, I'm almost out of questions on the list here, so load some questions into that chat window. I'll get to them. What is the most important thing to prepare for wedding event photo coverage in general? He's new to this kind of photography experience, and he would like to know my insights. So Ryan posted this question in my Facebook group. So I did ask him back after he posted the question, you're talking preparing for weddings in terms of your gear, or are you talking about kind of just in general prep? So he responded back and he said general. So Ryan, I think that the first thing in terms of preparing for a wedding is spending a fair amount of time with your bride and groom and making sure that you are setting realistic expectations. I find one of the biggest disconnects that happen with wedding photographers is, they get really excited, especially when you're starting out, which is also generally when you're not charging enough money, right? The bride and groom, they know they're getting a good deal. So it's like, okay, cool. Do your thing. And you're thinking, okay, this is great. I'm going to go and I'm going to like shoot everything and I'll have tons of pictures and everybody's going to be happy. And then afterwards, it's kind of like, oh, but you didn't get a picture of that. Oh, but you didn't get a picture of this grandmother who's probably going to die in 2 weeks, and all that kind of stuff, right? So spending that additional time prior to the wedding, making sure that there are very realistic expectations of what they want from you, and literally building out a shot list. And then when I talk about realistic expectations, so, frequently a bride and groom will say, yeah, we want like these 35 group shots, and we want to do them in the park after the wedding. Now, the park's only 5 miles away, so it'll only take a couple minutes to get there by car, but we only have an hour before we have to be at the reception, and we can't be late to the reception, because if we're late at the reception and dinner gets served late, that costs us extra money. Well, now you have a problem. They're expecting you to do 35 group shots in what's going to wind up being about 40 minutes, right? So that's not possible. You're just not going to do it. So, you've got to make sure that you are setting realistic expectations with your client and really kind of going through the details that way, because if you don't, you're basically setting yourself up to fail. The next thing that I would encourage you to do, especially if you're just getting started with wedding photography, go to the venues. Go to the church. if at all possible, at the time of day that the ceremony is going to happen. Go to the reception venue, if at all possible, at the time of day, especially if it's a reception venue that has windows. If you're going to shoot in a park, if you're going to shoot wherever, go there at the time of day. See the location, scout out your backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you guys follow me on Instagram, and if you don't follow me on Instagram, why the heck not? I was posting on my Instagram stories on Monday. I was in New York in the Dumbo section of Brooklyn, which is down along the waterfront by Lower Manhattan. It sits right between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. And I was scouting locations for the day because this Friday, 2 days from now, I'm going to be in New York for the day shooting an Instagram campaign for Olympus with 2 young Instagrammers. And so I didn't want to leave it to chance that I would just get there and find, oh, all kinds of great ideas, great. You know, now I know where all the best photo spots are. I know where the really cool walls are. I know where there's really good backgrounds. I've mapped those out throughout the different times of day. And so I'm prepared, and I have a very methodical kind of path that I want to travel through Dumbo while I'm shooting so that I can maximize my shooting time. Also on Friday when I went up, I went to the Javits Center because I'm going to be doing that photo walk in the end of October for Photo Plus. And the challenge with photo walks, so you only get 2 hours, right? So if you've ever been to the Javits Center in New York, you know that the Javits Center sits in what is ultimately a pretty crappy area. I just mean crappy visually. There's like nothing around the Javits Center. It's just junk, right? So my hope was, can I find enough really good locations right on the outside the Javits Center and along that main drag there to be able to do these street fashion shots. So indeed, I did. So I'm very happy. That way, I get to maximize the shooting and the teaching time with my group instead of having to walk for 20 minutes because, believe me, in New York, I know where you're going to go. It's a 20-minute walk or more, right? So I didn't want to have to walk for 20 minutes to find some nice shooting spots. So I found some perfect spots right outside the Javits Center. Are there cooler spots in New York? Yes, there are. But is it practical to, get to them and you've got a 2-hour window and be able to teach a little bit and give people a chance to shoot and then get back to the Javits Center in 2 hours? It's not practical. So that advanced planning and seeing the locations, making sure that you know what they're going to look like at the appropriate times of day, all that kind of stuff, super, super, super important. So that's where I would start, Ryan. Okay? All right. Let's see. Nuj, I'm not even sure how to pronounce that name, but it says, no question, just wanted to drop in and say thanks for being focused on everything but gear despite having a relationship with Olympus. I appreciate it. I mean, everybody, let's face it, everybody's going to do their thing. I will say the people that are all about gear, they have more subscribers and they get more views than I do, but that's just not my thing. So I appreciate you guys appreciating what I do, and believe me, that's going to be the goal, okay? Let's see, FN89, I have the OMD Mark II and the 12-40 Pro lens. I've been having trouble with getting shallow depth of field with this combo. I understand the distance from subject and subject distance from the background. Any tips? So again, are you being realistic? It depends, number one, on how much shallow depth of field do you want, right? If you want the same kind of depth of field that you're going to get Newt. All right, cool. Thank you. If you want the same kind of depth of field that you're going to get from, like a 1.2 lens on a full frame, or, these 0.95 lenses they've got now, you're not going to do that with Micro Four Thirds because it's just not going to shape the same. So unfortunately, you don't get a whole lot of sympathy from me because, as you guys have heard me say many, many times, what's more important here, the background or the foreground, right? In terms of managing it, your distance from the subject and subject distance from the background, also keep in mind that your focal length is going to have an impact on that. So obviously that 12-40 is a 2.8 lens. So you're going to shoot wide open, rack it out to the 40 millimeter. That's the 80 millimeter full frame equivalent. That's how you're going to get the shallowest depth of field that you possibly can with it. But beyond that, it only goes up to 40 millimeters, right? So 40 millimeters is only capable of, creating a certain amount of shallow depth of field. That's just how it is, okay? And that's got nothing to do with Micro Four Thirds. That's just 40 millimeter can only create so much depth of field or shallow depth of field. Isaiah, you dropped your Godox 8200. Ouch! Having trouble finding where to buy the LCD screen. I would start with wherever you bought the strobe and, either see if they have, repair service available. If that doesn't work, because I'm honestly, I have not run into that problem yet, but the other option that you may run into is try either one of the retailers who sell Godox. So for instance, like Hunt's Photo and Video, you guys hear me talk about them all the time. They're in Massachusetts, but they're available online. They sell Godox now. They may be able to help you out. That would be one of the first places I would start. If not, you might want to try, gosh, what is the name now? Molite. So it's Molight, M-O-L-I-G-H-T, Molight.com. They're a Godox retailer in the U.S. I believe they're based out in Wisconsin. Michael is the gentleman's name that runs that. They may be able to help you out. You bought it off of eBay. Yeah. So, I mean, I honestly don't know what Godox's repair service scenario is. So, you know, even though you got it off of eBay, I would contact one of the local retailers because they would at least hopefully be able to tell you, hey, this is the process you've got to go through. So my advice to you would be to reach out to Hunt's Photo and Video. They're based in Massachusetts, but they're online. It's huntsphotoandvideo.com. Check them out, and I'm pretty sure they'll be able to at least help point you in the right direction, okay? But do keep in mind that if you bought it on eBay, unless you bought it used, in which case, yeah, then you just need to find a repair service. But if you bought it from a retailer, that's a retailer selling on eBay, so you could also reach out to them, okay? Frank, other than moving around and engaging in the shoot, is there any other reason to use primes over zooms? Speed. I mean, that's really the biggest thing. You know, primes are going to give you more speed, but you know, there was a time back in the dark ages. In fact, actually, you know, sadly, I was a teenager when the first zoom lenses came out. Okay, and they sucked. They were absolutely horrible. They weren't sharp. They were really slow. They were just horrible. That's not the case today. Zoom lenses today are every bit as good as primes in terms of their functionality, in many cases in terms of their speed. Yeah, I mean, you know, we talked about the 12-100 f4 on Olympus earlier, or, you know, Nikon and Canon users, they love their 70-200. Is that a problem? No, not at all. If you're happy with it, you're getting the kind of imagery you want. The big difference you'll run into with primes is obviously they're only going to go to 2.8. So if you go with a prime, you can, you know, do a 1.8, 1.4, 1.2. So if you're one of those bokeh crazy people, you know, the prime's going to give you a little bit more shallow on the depth of field side. But again, for me, I didn't get into photography, and I especially didn't get into portrait photography because of the backgrounds, right? So yeah, I like a soft background, but I'm not willing to kill myself over what is the shape of the bokeh ball in the background. Just not interested in that at all, okay? All right, so let's see here. Damien, this is Ryan. Thanks for answering the question from Facebook. You're very welcome, man. Thank you. All right, so let's scroll back up here because I know there was a bunch of stuff. A&O Rots, what wheeled bag or case to use to transport your light stands on location? Weren't you here last week? We talked about this last week. It's a Pelican case, and they're compact light stands. So it's the Pelican 1650, and then I use the Luma Pro 7-foot compact light stands. I have a video that I'm going to do shortly because so many people have asked me about this travel stuff. I'm putting together a video to show what I take when I travel, also with some tips that I've learned about the airlines and how to best deal with your luggage and that kind of stuff. So I am going to share all that, but yeah, it's a Pelican 1650. That's the one that handles my stands. But those are compact stands. If you want to be able to take full-size stands, then you're going to need a much bigger case, and I don't do that. So I don't really have a good recommendation for you. Okay. Let's see here. Nick, you're coming to Delaware next month. That's awesome. What could you expect? Ha! Craziness, because that's what I do. I do craziness. Let me see here. Let's switch back over, and I'll go back. So I'll be honest with you. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what I'm speaking about in Delaware, but I will gladly tell you. So I'm going to be at the Horizon Photography Summit. So that's right after Photo Plus. So I've got 3 weeks in a row. Photo Plus is coming up 25, 26, 27 of October. And then November 2, 3, and 4, I'll be in Newark, Delaware at the Horizon Photography Summit. And then November 9 and 10, I'll be in St. Louis for the Crevcore camera Photopalooza, right? So at Horizon on Friday the 2nd, I'm going to be doing a full day workshop, which is fashion and glamour portraiture, runs from 10 a.m. to 5:30. And we're going to cover a ton of stuff. You can see it all there. We're going to work with, working with models, makeup artists, posing techniques. I'm going to teach you my whole philosophy about not posing and why, oftentimes the best pose is not a pose. Using props, backgrounds, lighting, all that stuff. For those of you that know the young woman who is my makeup artist and frequently models in my videos, Monet will be my model and makeup artist that day, so you'll get to meet her and you'll have a chance to photograph her. And then for the rest of that event, on Saturday the 3rd, I'll be doing a talk, a kind of classroom talk on portraits with simple lighting. And so there will be a demo. Monet will be there. I'll be demoing. You won't have the opportunity to shoot that one, unfortunately. It's very short. And then from 11 to 12:15, also a classroom demo on fashion portraiture. So that's on Saturday. And then Sunday the 4th, I will be doing a morning talk about boost your creative photographic abilities. And I'm not going to lie to you. So there won't be any shooting. There won't be any models. This is one of my favorite talks that I do. It actually deals with some of the science that you guys hear me talk about why we take bad pictures and why our brains fool us into taking bad pictures. So that's what'll be happening in that talk. So yeah, that's the stuff with Horizon. I can tell you from past Horizons events that I have spoken with, it's a great program. The guy that runs it, his name is Steve Gottlieb, does an awesome job. So Nick, yeah, I definitely hope I get to see you there. Okay. All right. Dwayne's asking, anybody shoot the 35mm f1.4 for Sigma for Sony? If so, I'd love your thoughts on the lens. So Dwayne, you notice a lot of people didn't chime in here because we don't really do a whole lot of gear stuff. But here's the thing. Like if somebody has a 35 1.4 from Sigma for Sony, by all means, feel free to share, but don't do it. Dwayne, you got to give us more information because honestly, that's a very lazy question. And I'm not trying to pick on you, man. I want you to understand a little bit about how I think as a teacher. Anybody shoot the 35mm 1.4 for what? What do you shoot? What do you want to shoot it for? What is your interest? What are you actually hoping to learn? You asked a really generic, extremely broad question, which even if there were 20 people in here that shot with that lens, it's just going to give you a lot of random information. So if you're considering buying that lens, how about sharing with us, what do you shoot? What are you hoping to shoot with it? Specifically, what are you looking for, et cetera. And then we can try to, to help you out. So, okay. FN89, aside from the 45mm 4/3 lens, what is your second choice for a prime? Well, if we're talking portraits, it would be the 75 1.8. I love that. Also keep in mind that 60mm is a great lens for shooting portraits. It's a great focal length for doing portraits. For on the primes, those would be probably my top 3 for portraits. And then from there, I'm not gonna lie, I love the 25 f1.2 Pro, the 17 f1.2 Pro, beautiful lenses, and the 8mm f2.8 fisheye, a lot of fun. So yeah, but for portraits, aside from that 45, it's going to be the 75 1.8. And keep in mind too, gang, one of the nice things about Olympus is you don't have to spend for the pro lenses. They also make a 45 1.8 in the regular M.Zuiko premiums, which believe me, awesome lens. Okay. Mike Hardy, other than a camera, is there anything else that you should bring for the photo walk, Photo Plus? No, I mean, maybe bring yourself a bottle of water, that kind of thing, but no, bring a camera. This is going to be like, we're going to do this photo walk, the street fashion, just like so many of the fashion photographers in New York do. It's basically guerrilla style. It's like we're going to take a model, we're going to go out, and we are going to create images. She's going to have a couple simple props with her. And at most we'll use a couple reflectors depending on the weather that day. But that's it. So we are going to work with, really, really simple tools. What I will be, which is what I always do when people have an opportunity to shoot at my photo walks or at my demos, is really try to get all of you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, to kind of push you outside of your box a little bit. I'll tell you straight up, Mike, the one thing you don't want to do, don't come to my photo walk to build your portfolio. For a bunch of reasons. Number one, I'm not going to give you a whole lot of opportunity to do that because I want to teach you things. Number two, there's going to be like 15 or 20 other people with the exact same pictures. So that's, these pictures are not going to set you apart in what you're doing. And though I will tell you, for the rest of you, if you're thinking about coming to Photo Plus, one of the most important things, if you're going to go to a show like Photo Plus, make sure you bring SD cards. You don't even have to bring your camera. I mean, you should, right? But at a minimum, bring SD cards, because every manufacturer, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Panasonic, and yes, Olympus, will have cameras there that you can put your SD cards in and try out. At Olympus, even if you're not an Olympus shooter, we're going to have a section of our booth. It's called the Portrait Experience. I will be in the Portrait Experience at the beginning of every hour for like 10 to 15 minutes doing little portrait demos. You can walk up, you can shoot with any kind of camera you want, but be forewarned, I'm going to try and get you to try a couple shots with one of the Olympus cameras and the 1.2 lenses, just to try it out. I'm not going to sell you a camera. I'm not going to give you a big sales pitch. It's going to be a short demo that I'll be doing at the top of every hour, except for the hours that I'm presenting on the main stage. So it's going to be a really crazy show for me, but I'm looking forward to it because I'll get to meet lots of you. So aside from, yes, Nikon will require the XQD cards. So if you want to try out that Nikon, you'll need to bring those. But, you know, aside from that, Mike, bring your cameras, bring your lenses. That's what you're going to need. So, Gene Moore, do I have a favorite light modifier to use with the AD200s? I don't have a favorite light modifier, but I have favorites. It really depends on what I'm shooting, Gene. You know, from the standpoint of kind of an octodome type thing, I have, you know, this MoLight. It's a 30-inch round beauty dish softbox. I frequently use the 7 and 5-inch silver reflectors with the Kodak strobes. In fact, you can see one here. If I move over, there it is. It's right there on the background light. It's got a little amber colored gel for a rim. I use those. So there's a lot that I like to play with. I also, you know, use beauty dishes. I have beauty dishes running from 16 inches on up to 28 inches. The 28-inch would definitely be my preferred. That's kind of my go-to in the beauty dish. But lately, I've been playing around a lot with that 16-inch, which definitely gives some really kind of crisp light with really rapid light fall off. So it's got to be very carefully placed, but you know, it has its place. So, okay. Adam, do I have any desire to shoot adapted old manual lenses? Simple answer, Adam, hell no. There's like, one, they're adapted. Two, they have the word old in them. I have enough of that in my life, so as it is, right? But yeah, no, to me, the problem with that stuff is, it just slows you down, right? It just slows you down because now you're putzing around with the lens and you're trying to pay attention to the lens. When I'm shooting, I'm paying attention to my subject. What's going on in front of the camera? And I don't care if it's a landscape. What's going on in front of the camera? That's where my mind needs to be. I don't want to be playing around with toys. Now, again, I respect the fact for some people, that's what they like. Their pleasure are the toys. It's the gear, and that's totally cool. But for me, no. I like lenses that are engineered to work with the cameras so that they are seamless, so that I don't have to think about it, so that, you know, I put it on the camera and I go. Okay? Let's see here. Jean Lapalmi, you just converted the Micro Four Third. Today, congratulations. Welcome to the dark side. Today, you just purchased a Panasonic 25mm f 1.7. 5 minutes ago, I mentioned the 45. What's a reasonable price used to pay for it so you don't overpay? Oh, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I really don't know. Depending on where you're located, if you're in the US, what I would recommend is first go to a company like Adorama, who posts lots of used gear. See what they're selling it at. Used. That's going to be the higher end of the used prices, right? Then go to eBay and see, you know, kind of what it's trending and tracking at used on eBay, and know that you're, you know, going to be probably somewhere slightly above that, but you don't want to go any higher than what Adorama is selling at. But I honestly have no idea what its used value is. Andrew's saying $250. So yeah, if you can pull that off, awesome. Okay. Chaz Madge, what are your views on the round head for the 8200? Is there a reason for them making it? Well, I'm sure there's a reason for them making it. This is probably not the answer they would want somebody to give, but I'm sure the reason for them making it is to create a very reasonably priced alternative to those ridiculously expensive Profoto lights, right? I think it's a great idea. I personally don't have a lot of use for it. Will I probably wind up getting one or two? Yeah, you know, down the road, I'll probably pull the trigger, have a little gas and get them. But with the way that I work in my studio and with the modifiers that I use, I just don't have a lot of value for them at this point. So, you know, if you have a need for that round light, then great. But otherwise, is it going to be like better or anything like that? No, not at all. Okay. What I do like about it, very specifically though, I love the magnetic modifier system that they came up with it. So, you know, Godot's kind of come up with their own mag mod setup, right? That fits. It's not kind of the big rubbery modifiers, but like all the color gels, the grids and that just magnetize right on it. And let's face it, you can't patent magnets. So I think you're going to find a lot more stuff being done with magnets in the future. You know, MagMod's had a great run. Spencer, who's the guy that created the MagMods, you know, brilliant. He's really made his money. But yeah, they're going to start to get some competition in the magnet space because it's one of those things. It's a brilliant concept. Okay. So let's see here. Mike Supanic says for use, he always visits FM forums. You can search classifieds and look at a history of sorts. So there you go. Yeah. So Adam, have I played with the OI Share app? I have. I like it. In fact, I'll be using it hardcore on Friday while I'm in Dumbo in New York because I'll be shooting. So this campaign, this Instagram campaign, is for the Olympus EPL9, which is a small point and shoot. In fact, here I'll grab that camera so you guys can see it. Because for those of you that aren't like Olympus people, you probably have no idea what kind of camera I'm talking about here. The EPL9, and I have a pretty blue one. You see that? How cool does that look, right? So you'll notice no viewfinder. It does have a drop down. So like if you want to do you know, selfies with it or that kind of stuff, you can drop the screen down, see the screen from the front, view it from the back. One of the neat things about it is this uses the full range of Olympus lenses, right? So this particular little pancake lens is a 14 to 42 zoom, which is a really nice range, but I can put any of my lenses on this camera. So Olympus is marketing this camera. Well, they're marketing it to a lot of people, but right now they're doing a big push on Instagram with this camera. And so they're marketing it to kind of young women, a lot of Instagrammers and that type of stuff. So we're going to be spending a day up in Dumbo working with a couple Instagrammers, teaching them how to use the camera, photographing them, and then also having them photograph each other, you know, and then photographing that whole process. So that's what we're doing. And so I'll be using that OI Share app pretty much all day long, you know, with those images. So, but yeah, it's great. I don't use it in the studio, you know, in that sense, because I'm tethered to a computer. But out and about, sure, it's awesome. And especially if you want to, you know, pull an image off the camera quickly and share it on social media, and even be able to do some editing with it. The app does have some fairly decent editing features to it. I will admit, I'll use the OI Share app for the transfers. I still tend to use Snapseed if I'm going to do any editing on the phone. But yeah, it's definitely, compared to, you know, what was available for Nikon, God, yeah, it's like light years ahead. So, okay. Bernardo Silva, is there any situation where the 8200 is a worse call than a TT685 flashlight? Speed. Sorry. So the two main differences, Bernardo, the 8200's got a much faster recycle time, right? And it's a little more powerful. So the 8200 is about 3 times more powerful than the TT685, and it's got like a 1 second recycle. So if you need those two features, then the 8200 is definitely a much better call. If you don't need those two features, then using a TT685 would be absolutely fine. Okay, so I mean that definitely wouldn't be an issue. So Nick, I wear glasses to shoot. You need them for the OVF and take them off to look at live view for mirrorless EVF. Can I keep my glasses off since I'm essentially looking at a TV half an inch away? Well, so it depends. If you are going to look at the EVF in your camera, Nick, that's really pretty much going to be the same optically with your glasses as what you're doing through an OVF, an optical viewfinder, right? If you're going to hold the camera out here, which I don't recommend doing unless you have to, like with that EPL9, it's your only choice. But if you have the choice of putting the camera to your eye or holding it out here, put the camera to your eye, always. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of science behind that I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole tonight, so you have to take my word for it for now. But as far as your glasses go, that's going to be basically the same as working with an OVF. It's not going to be any different. And at least with my Olympus, and I'm pretty sure Sony does, and I'm sure Nikon and Canon did this as well. Keep in mind, you do have that little diopter in the viewfinder so that you can make corrections for eyeglasses, just like you did with DSLRs. So, I mean, that's certainly an option. So, Trevor, was that lens cap magnetic? No, it's just a small lens cap. It's got clips to it, just like a tiny lens cap. So yeah, it's just really small. So, Duke, I have soft boxes and shoot through umbrellas. Should I invest in a soft box with a grid for portraits? Based on the fact that you asked that question, Duke, my answer is no, not at all. And the reason I say that is you don't know why, right? You're just saying, well, yeah, I see some people using grids. I find that 80% of the pictures that you see done with grids on the internet didn't need grids, right? People think it's cool. I personally hate grids, right? To me, that defeats the purpose. Like, you know, I'm using a softbox to get nice soft light, and then I'm going to try and make the light harsh with the softbox. So why use the softbox in the first place? Why not just go with a different modifier, or better yet, just go with a light with a silver reflector and a diffuser over the front of it, right? So keep in mind, there's a lot of different ways to get light. So for me to have a big softbox and then stick a grid on it, I'm not, I mean, obviously you can do it, but I find that most of the people that do it don't know why they're doing it, other than it looks cool. So based on the way you asked the question, dude, my advice is no, save your money, don't buy the grid and the softbox and all that stuff. So Hero Shots. Quick question. I still use the Olympus EM1. Should I wait to see if Olympus is making a new camera or just upgrade to the Mark II? You know, so there's a couple ways to look at this, right? If you were a Sony user, I would say, well, the problem that you have there is, it doesn't matter when you buy their camera, they're going to come out with a new one like in 12 months and your camera will be old, right? So it doesn't matter when you buy it. You know, the good part with Olympus is you go a couple of years before bodies come out, you know, and there's upgrades. You know, there's been rumors about Olympus coming out with a camera next year. I don't know anything specific. I've heard rumors about Olympus coming out with a lens next year, or actually several lenses next year. It's neat being a visionary, and yes, we have a lot of inside information, not about that stuff. Just like any other camera manufacturer, they are really, really tight-lipped. In fact, the sales rep that I was traveling with in Florida this weekend, I was asking him, it's like, so hey, did they give you guys like any inside scoop? What's coming up next? Is it going to be a new camera next year? Because for those of you that aren't Olympus users, next year is the 100th anniversary for Olympus. So who knows, maybe? And he's like, you know what? I have no idea. It's like and literally where they get their inside scoop, they get their inside scoop on the Micro Four Thirds rumor sites and some of the other rumor sites. You know, Olympus keeps that pretty tight-lipped. But I think what you really have to look at here, Hero Shots, is if you have a need for an upgraded camera now, and if you have the funds, buy the camera. If you're just looking at that Mark II and saying, well, you know, it'd be really nice, I'd love to do it, but I don't really need it, well, then okay, wait a while and see what happens, right? Obviously, Olympus didn't announce anything at Photokina. So it's certainly possible they could announce something at the beginning of the year, but, you know, and that's a couple months off. So part of it depends on how patient you are. But most importantly, it should honestly depend on what is your need. Is that EM1 meeting your needs right now? If it's meeting your needs, then why upgrade, okay? I would be more inclined to say, is there other gear that would allow you to broaden your capabilities? Maybe some lenses, maybe some lighting equipment. Frederick, no, this is not live. This was recorded 3 days ago, honest. No, I'm kidding. It's live. Hero Shots, yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you more information. I'd love to be able to say, oh, it's going to be this with these features. I have no idea. So let's see here. Jean Lapalme, you wish you had a Pen F Digital. The Pen F is a sweet little camera. I'm not going to lie. I'll own it, gang. The Pen F was my gas purchase, gear acquisition syndrome. When I switched over, the Pen F was gas. I didn't need it. I fell in love with it. When I first got to play with it at WPPI in Las Vegas, it's like, it is just cool. It is simply a cool camera. So yeah, I absolutely love it. But it was kind of a gas purchase for me. Hey, Jamie's here. So there you go, gang. If you got any other Olympus questions. And this guy, he's a machine, okay? He's talking about Wayback Machine with Joe. Jamie McDonald is also an Olympus Visionary. He's from Michigan. He is one half of the bi-weekly show on YouTube called Mirrorless Minutes. But also, this guy's been a visionary for quite some time. He's the man. Turns out more images than I could ever imagine. And, you know, I'm like the rookie. I'm still learning a lot about this gear. So for me, like, every day's an adventure. But if you guys got any hardcore Olympus questions that I haven't answered for you, ask Jamie. He's here watching, okay? So let's see here. Aaron Edwards, did I miss your reply to my question? Gosh, I'm sorry. You may have, but let me scroll back and see if I can find your name. And Aaron, just to play it safe, why, if you don't mind, would you type the question again? And I will gladly answer it for you, but I apologize. I'm scrolling back here, and I am not seeing it. Oh, wait, here we go. Aaron Edwards, I got it. Can you use the AD200 and the AD-S2 to replicate what you do with Flashpoint in your one light tutorial where you bounce it off the ceiling? Oh, heck yeah. Easily. Yeah. Especially like if you're working even in a space like this, that would be more than ample light to do that, Aaron. That would totally work. So, okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. So I got a couple more on my list here. Good. Go ahead, guys. Keep typing those questions in here. Let me get these last couple. Gontran had a question here. What about using polarizers to reduce shiny skin? So, Gontran, I don't know if you were here in the beginning when I answered John Edwards' question about shooting the cello and the cello being really shiny. In theory, you could use a polarizer to reduce shiny skin. The problem with that is, you know, polarizers work based on angles of light, right? So if you're working with a subject and that person is moving at all and they, you know, or you change your angle, every time you do that, you're having to readjust that polarizer. So you're going to find yourself getting frustrated and it's going to be like, stop, 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 don't move. And now you've got a really stiff subject, right? So that's kind of the challenge with using a polarizer with a human. I would much rather plan ahead, work with a makeup artist, or even at a minimum, even if you're not going to work with a makeup artist, you can go to the pharmacy and you can buy like essentially little makeup blotting wipes that are good for taking out shine. Worst case scenario, and this should always be your last ditch attempt, but you can use a Kleenex and blot. If the model or subject is wearing any makeup at all, when you do the blotting, be careful not to rub because it will smudge makeup and that looks bad. The biggest thing you don't want to do though with shine is don't use powder. The cameras that we're using today have so much resolution. You use powder, you're going to age the person tremendously because you're going to add all kind of texture to their skin. Not a good idea. It's just not, right? So that's why most makeup artists now, they use like a matting foundation that has that matting finish to it. Or, you know, some makeup artists are still using airbrushing, which is also, you know, has the ability to do matting. But you can actually buy their like these little, they almost look like lens cleaning cloths is what they look similar to. And you just kind of, you know, give them a little dab and that will help with a lot of shine. And then also on my YouTube channel, there's a video about how to remove shine in Lightroom and Photoshop. So of course, that should always be your last ditch effort, right? The goal is not have the shine in the first place. But if you wind up with it and you got to take it out, check out that video. And it's a super, super simple process, really, really quick process for being able to get rid of shine, okay? George A, I want to learn how to use ND filters with flash and wide apertures outdoors. Is it okay to invest in cheap filters just for the purpose of learning? You just do this as a hobby. Well, you know, George, there's a couple schools of thought there, right? So let me try and give you, you know, a balanced response, right? There is the school of thought that says, even though you may be anxious, don't buy the cheap stuff because it's only going to cost you more money in the long run because you're eventually going to have to buy the good stuff. That's option one. Option two is, since you're just doing it as a hobby, and if you're not sure that this is a technique that you want to use long-term or that you're going to do a lot of, then yes, go buy cheap filters to try it out, see how it works. Because basically what you're describing and what you want to do is you want to overpower the sun. It sounds like you want to overpower the sun outside, be able to shoot with shallow depth of field. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying, like, everybody does it. It's boring. It's overdone. So the way you phrase the question, for the sake of learning, yes, I highly support that. And I would say, look for a good deal on filters and, experiment and see what you come up with. But if you are convinced that you want to be overpowering the sun and that you don't want to do it with high-speed sync, in other words, you want to go old school and use the ND filters, which is great, it works perfectly fine, then I would say, try to at least maybe not buy the high-end filter, the most expensive, but try to at least get like a mid-range filter that is going to give you, some decent glass to work with, okay? So it really depends on, what you're kind of imagining down the road in terms of how much of that do you think you'll do, okay? So Frederick Maxwell, what size is the softbox behind you? You're looking for a good softbox for the 8200. So this is it's a 30-inch beauty dish. So it's round. What's neat about this, let me see if I can get this down far enough that you guys can see it. Yeah. So it's by a company called Molight, M-O-L-I-G-H-T, Molight.com, okay? So this is the Mo BD for beauty dish. Inside, it's got a center diffuser, which is like double layered in the very middle, plus another diffuser here. So what you wind up with, even though it's collapsible and it's a softbox, you get the same kind of light and the same kind of catch light as what you get from a metal beauty dish. So that's what I particularly like about it. And then I use the the S adapter. I've got the Godox 8200 stuck in it. So that's kind of one of my favorites. It's also not ridiculously expensive, but it's also not super cheap, right? I mean, you can spend a whole lot more money. So Mike Supanic, if you live near a larger camera store, you may be able to rent a filter for a day or two. And actually, yeah, Mike, I mean, even I'd be willing to bet, and I don't know this for a fact, but if you're in the US, I'd be willing to bet some of the companies like Lens Rentals or Bar Lenses probably do rent some brands of filters to try some stuff out. I will say for the idea of local camera stores. So you guys know this past weekend, I was down in Florida for Olympus. I spoke for the folks at Pittman Photo and also Johnson Photo Supply in Bradenton. Obviously, if you're old like me and you've been around for a while, you know that there used to be so many more camera stores. And in all fairness, a lot of them were going out of business even before Amazon and the internet came along. But, B&H, Amazon, they crushed so many of the small mom and pop shops. And I want to be clear, I don't have sympathy for the small mom and pop shops. I'm not making B&H and Adorama out, or Amazon out to be the bad guys. They're smart business people. And let's face it, we all benefit from what they do. So this is not trash the big guys, right? It's kind of like newspapers. It's not the internet's fault that newspapers went out of business. It's newspapers' fault because they had their head in the sand, right? And that's kind of what happened to a lot of these camera stores. But here's the cool part. The camera stores that are left, you guys hear me talk about Hunt's Photo and Video all the time. There's so many of these companies, around the country. Midwest Photo Exchange in Ohio. There's Roberts in Illinois. And I know I'm going to forget a bunch. There's Bedford in Oklahoma. There's Precision and Fort Worth Camera in Texas. There's Crevcore Camera in St. Louis. All these companies are doing it right. And what they're doing right is two very important things. One, they understand the value of relationships. Okay, they don't want to just sell you a camera. It's like, see it, get the heck out of here. They want a relationship with you. They want you to come back. They want you to come back for your accessories. They want you to come back with your questions. These are the places that are actually going to take the time to stand there and have a conversation with you, even when you don't put your credit card on the counter. And the other thing they get is the importance of education. They're building community. So, at least pay attention to your local camera stores. Are you never going to shop at B&H and Amazon again? No. Do I shop at B&H and Amazon? Sure, frequently. But I also have a great camera store here in Allentown called Dan's Camera, where if I need to go pick something up right away, man, I'm there, okay? I frequently actually order stuff from Hunt's Photo in Massachusetts because I can order online, all right? Roger McLeod, they have donuts. That's right. At Johnson this past Saturday, they had donuts, which are awesome donuts, by the way. Langston Ball, Sammy's is a big one out in the West Coast. So believe me, don't forget about these stores because one of the biggest values when you guys have questions like you're asking, so many of these questions tonight, the way we used to do it when I was a kid, so here's the old guy talking, right? We would go to the camera store and we'd ask the guy to take that piece of equipment out of the case and we could handle it. They would always tell us don't drool on it, right? But we could handle it. We could play with it. We could check it out. That's what these stores do. Most of these local camera stores, which I didn't even know, I actually learned this weekend. Most of these local camera stores now in the US do rentals. I keep telling people, hey, go to the internet, go to Lens Rentals, go to barlenses.com, and they're great. I've used them. They work wonderfully. But if you've got a local camera store and you want to try out a camera before you buy it, you can probably go rent it there. If it's a newer camera, you can probably rent it and check it out. Now, certainly, like if you go and try and rent a Nikon Z, no, they don't have enough in stock yet. So you're not going to rent a Nikon Z at your local camera store because literally as fast as they come in the door, they go out the door. In fact, the folks at Johnson were telling me about how they got them in last week. And one of their customers was nice enough to open it while he was in the store so that they could actually see it because they hadn't seen one yet. They had a couple of them come in, but they were all accounted for and sold. So one guy was actually nice enough to open and let them see it. So, again, local camera stores are worth supporting as much as possible. At the end of the day, yes, you support your bank account too, okay? Just realize that these stores are a great resource. That's the key. They are a really, really good resource because the stores that are surviving today are smart. They have evolved. They have adapted. They've changed the way their business model works. And they understand that that business model is relationships and education. That's the key, okay? Jean Lapalme, when do you do time for prints with models? When it's a free photo shoot, do you ask for a signed modeling release? Always, absolutely. You always want a modeling release. Do that as a habit. I think I've told you guys before, I use an app. It's an app called Easy Release. That's the one that I particularly like. Basically, I can have my subjects, fill out the modeling release, sign it, and then once they signed it, it creates a PDF that includes their picture, all their contact information, their signature, everything, and it emails that PDF both to the model and to me. And then I don't print them out, ever. I used to. I literally have a whole file cabinet, 4 drawers, a file cabinet filled with old modeling releases from before, this stuff. Now they all go right into the cloud. So there are local copies on my computers and also on my backup drives here, but they're also up in the cloud, so I don't worry about actually making printed copies of them at this point. But even in a time for print, you should absolutely do a modeling release. It's just smart, okay? So let's see here. Nick, you bought this after you saw on TogChat. Very well made, easy, it comes in a great case also. Good, glad to hear that. So Jamie, love Easy Release. Yeah, iOS and Android, totally the way to go. It makes life super, super simple, okay? Let's see, Troy Hall, looks like the inner baffle in it would be the same as a single diffuse softbox. In this, Troy, yeah, the only difference is this inner baffle, it's got an extra layer in the very center, which you guys can kind of see that. Usually the baffle in a softbox is just going to be one layer. But part of that is kind of the trick of how it creates the catch light that looks like a beauty dish, okay? All right, gang. So once again, I blew it. 60 minutes. I'm at 93 minutes. So I think it's time to sign off because that means you guys owe me like 186 minutes with your cameras in your hands this week. And I know that I'm going to insult a few people, but there's only one guy here that I have confidence will make that 186 minutes without fail. And that's Jamie McDonald. So the challenge is for the rest of you, get that shooting time in. So, by the way, this Saturday, October 6th, Scott Kelby's worldwide photo walk day. If you're not involved, and you can look it up, Google it. If you're not going to actually participate in a photo walk on Saturday, make sure you're at least out shooting pictures. So I don't care what you're doing. At some point in the day, Saturday, you better shoot. I'm not going to get to do a photo walk, but I am going to spend Saturday morning photographing a ton of toddlers in a trampoline place because it's my grandson's 4th birthday. So that's going to be my shooting for the day. And guess what? Micro Four Thirds, low light, people jumping on trampolines. I have no fear. It'll be fine. All right, gang, so as always, seriously, thank you so much for spending the evening with me. Have a great week. Do take lots of pictures. And whatever you do, remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.